Thanks, Jordan, for that introduction. As Jordan said, my name is Rich Knuckles. I work at Insight, covering the Intel product line. I'll be the moderator for today's webinar, and I'd like to introduce a couple of my speakers and experts in this area around navigating through SQL Server, Microsoft Server end of life. First off, I'd like to introduce Tom Johnston, and Tom, if you can go a little bit on your background, and then we'll hit on Kent.
Sure. Welcome, everybody. My background is in VMware and cloud and a number of different areas, as well as Windows and SQL. So I look forward to the discussion.
And then we have Kent Christensen. Kent?
Thanks, Rich, and thanks everybody for joining. My name is Kent Christensen. I'm a practice director here at Insight, and my role is kind of in the strategic, put the solutions like this for our clients together and get them out to market.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. I can't wait to dig into the topics. And before I go dig into the SQL Server end of life, I wanted to touch on basically who Insight is. A lot of people may know who we are, where we started from. A lot of you may not really know kind of what our background and value propositions are. So back in the day, Insight started as more of a, what we call on the far left, the supply chain optimization, a place to buy your technical and business solutions, hardware, software, supply chain, integration, software management. So that was kind of our root and where we started from. We're still a very big part of the business, but we've really transitioned and transformed into other technical and IT and business solution areas. The next one over, as you can see, is more of what we call a connected workforce. So we have entire teams that can help manage devices, servers, can do device as a service, everywhere from leasing all the way to refresh, recycle with help, level 1, level 2, level 3 help desk support as well. So that's a really big area as people are looking on the device side for managing devices. So then the next pillar over is really where Kent and Tom fit in. So that's called our cloud and data center transformation. It really was a company that used to be called, or was called DataLink, that Insight acquired. Really are technical experts in the server arena, helping with assessments, consulting, everything around the modern data center. And the last one we have there is digital innovation. So Insight acquired a company called Blue Metal, and Blue Metal is experts in creating business applications for transforming and modernizing your infrastructure. A lot of that's around IoT realization and analytics as well. Okay, so that's kind of the overview of what Insight is and what our value props are. So obviously, at the end, we'll give you a call to action, and if you want to look at any of these other areas, please feel free to contact us. Okay, with that, so we want to kind of get a feel before we dig in with some poll questions where we get kind of like the lay of the land and see where you guys are falling. So first poll question we have, are you planning on upgrading to either Windows Server, from Windows Server 2008, SQL Server 2008, or both? And we're going to dig into a lot of this with Tom and Kent, both. So if you can please answer this, this will give us some background into what your plans are. Let's take a few minutes to go through this. All right, Kent, if we can move on to the next slide, see the results, hopefully. So yeah, it's kind of along the lines that we were thinking, I was thinking, as the type of results that we were going to get here. So let's do one more poll question, then we'll jump into the meat of the topic. So this one is, what is your time frame for upgrade? Obviously, the end of life is coming up fairly soon. So what is your take, or what do you see your time frame for actually upgrading? And then this will be our last poll question, then we're going to jump into the meat with both Tom and Kent and give you kind of their take on this whole migration strategy and pros and cons and good feedback there. Okay, Kent, so if you can move to the results. This is kind of what I was thinking as well. So I was hoping that a lot of you weren't in the 12 to 18 months, because that's where might be some problems dealing with the end of life support and costs associated with that. Okay, so let's kind of dig into the end of life or end of support on both SQL Server and Microsoft Server. So, and the first kind of area that I want Tom to talk on is, what is the timeline for the end of service? Are there relevant dates? Should we wait, or kind of give us a time frame for this, Tom, if you can touch on that?
Absolutely. Thanks, Rich. So as probably most of the folks on the webinar know, both products are going end of support here for Microsoft. They've announced that. SQL is within pretty close here, next few months. July 9th is the timeline for that. And then Windows 2008 R2 and just 2008 are just a little bit longer into the future, but early next year, January 14th of 2020. Obviously, people run the risk of performance and security updates will not be issued for these products after that time frame. So obviously, people are on this call to see how we can help them address that and what the risks are.
Great. Thanks, Tom. So then a lot of times, people want to kind of weigh what it would mean to, like, if they wait or if they do it sooner than later. And so what do you think the implications and risks are with waiting on this end of service or this migration?
Well, end of support, which is a very compelling event for those running mission-critical applications on SQL Server or Windows Server 2008. So as Thomas pointed out, that's technically the end of the support, though there are some ways to get around that, probably short term. But I think one of the biggest concerns is, you're putting, what are usually considered mission-critical applications at risk from a support point of view, from a security point of view. So end of support means, you're not going to automatically get security patches anymore. And then, one of the things we're seeing from our partners and from the clients we're talking to is they're also running a pretty old infrastructure for the most part. So by definition, anybody that's exposed to end of support is running in a data center or hosted environment, not in an Azure environment. And so, what we're seeing is that the infrastructure, many are saying that's close to end of support as well. So there's a lot of significant risk that they're taking on and maybe have been putting off because, nothing was broke, but this is really a compelling event.
Thanks, Ken. That's great. So then, obviously, with everything, there are options. And so some are more complex, more costly, more timely. So, Tom, what are some of the options as customers look to migrate to a new version of SQL Server and Microsoft Server?
Sure. There are actually quite a few options that customers have. One of the first is, to move to the cloud completely with these solutions, right? And that means a number of things. They could migrate purely to Azure. That would allow, as an IaaS type of a component, it would extend their support as doing so. So that's one option. The other one is, you move into the cloud, you'd modernize your applications as part of the upgrade. And build out and use those cloud features and functionalities that are available within that environment as an Azure infrastructure. Of course, you'd have to migrate to Azure was the first one I mentioned. So, and then a third option underneath move to the cloud would be migrate your Microsoft SQL environment as a PaaS offering, right? Because they have an offering, Microsoft does, around that. And so you can actually leverage that service to upgrade to that service and leverage it for your SQL environments. There are other cloud options as well around that that you could move to. And some considerations around that would be, cost, independency, what's it mean to, move to the cloud. Maybe it might mean that it's better to keep some on-prem and maybe have a mix of some database instances in the cloud and some on-prem. It really depends upon the workloads, where the data's at and where the applications are at. Another option is to actually upgrade your software in place. For instance, you could move SQL, for instance, from SQL 2008 to SQL 2016. You could do that on the same box. That's not necessarily best practice, so you probably at the same time want to maybe move to new hardware. One of the things that you're going to want to do during the upgrade process, whether it be for SQL or Windows, look like most people were concerned about SQL, is to do a considerations and analysis. So look at backwards compatibility. Sometimes people have their database instances in backwards compatibility mode. we really need to identify why are you doing that, what issues have you found that, and hurdles that we might need to address, those types of things.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom.
So we have our different options.
Great. So, Tom, we have our first question. This might be for you, but Kent, you can jump in as well. So the question comes: doesn't Microsoft now have extended security updates? Do you pay for it for both SQL Server and Windows Server?
So they do have extended support for both products, actually, and it actually gets to be pretty expensive. When we come in and help customers identify what's best for them, because that extended support is extremely expensive, and I think Kent actually has a slide later on. We'll have a slide we can talk about this a little bit about, but probably what is the best approach for most customers is not just to kick the can down the road, as we'll call it, but to evaluate how much of the piece of the pie I want to put on extended support. So that might be a partial component of the answer to how you want to get upgraded.
Yeah, just to follow up, the official extended support, as we found, is quite expensive. It's a large percentage of the software cost. The specific security updates, my understanding is they become manual after end of support, so we'll have to see what happens at that point, but my understanding is that clients will be required to do those manually.
Great. Thanks, guys. So as they go through this transformation or migration, Kent, so what's the need for new hardware? Do you have to have new hardware? Can I use my old hardware and servers? What's kind of your thought there?
Well, because it's likely that the hardware has been aged, and that's the data we're seeing, and that's the data we're seeing with clients. Now, if somebody happened to upgrade their hardware and didn't upgrade their application, then that may not be a need. But it's all the records are showing that the solutions that are in the field right now running these applications, which are quite old at this point, are on older hardware. Now, I know there's a drive for some people to get out of the data center, out of the cloud, and so getting new hardware doesn't mean you have to do it in your data center. You certainly can host it somewhere. So when people say migrate to the cloud, sometimes there's halfway solutions and hosting solutions and things like that. So when we say upgrade your hardware, it means something you control, where you're going to run the application. And we are seeing that over half of the clients right now, when they're indicating where they want to go, are saying, look, I'm going to probably not migrate to the public cloud in its entirety, maybe portions, et cetera. However, those who are going to refresh their infrastructure and create what we call a modern transformational infrastructure, there's a lot of good news. Since these applications were deployed, there's a lot of changes that have happened that are going to support better speed, better performance, better reliability, better supportability of these mission-critical applications. That goes everywhere from the servers are beefier, more memory. There's memory systems that are available that are specifically tuned to run SQL Server more efficiently. We have all flash as a storage medium that's pretty much the standard for anything that these applications would be supporting, et cetera. And even some new FPGAs that Intel is coming out with, and we're going to see those start to enter the industry. So one of the solutions we'll do is kind of go through with the client and say, okay, do you have any biases towards certain types of hardware, whether that be HPE or Dell or Cisco or whatever, as well as storage, or even should we be looking toward a converged type of solution, which has been pretty standard for a lot of larger SQL applications in the past, and moving forward, or even a hyperconverged, kind of a newer architecture out there. So those are all options, and they're going to provide a lot better experience than they've had in the past. Not that they've had problems in the past, but a lot of opportunity in moving forward. The other thing to point out is that one of the things we'll ask people to do is tell us how many physical servers and how many instances of SQL Server or Windows Server do they have. You can expect a significant consolidation over the physical servers. Your mileage may vary, but we're looking at 4 to 1 as kind of a benchmark there. So 4 times as many applications, with or a 75% reduction in physical servers.
Great. So kind of along those lines, Kent, so what are your thoughts on like a hybrid or a combination of different types of solutions rather than not all on cloud, not all on-prem? Is there a hybrid option here?
Yeah, so hybrid has a lot of meanings. So one of those, well, if you're thinking about SQL Server itself, they have a couple of terms that they use hybrid around. One of them is taking a hybrid approach to the licensing in Azure, leveraging some of the licensing credits you have for your on-premise license. So let's set that to the side. We'll figure that out later. Another is something called stretch SQL, or a hybrid where they put most of the database on site and then take age data and move that out to the cloud. They'll call that hybrid. But in this instance, I think what we expect to be fairly common is people who have a hybrid approach to the overall, where's my application running, i.e. is cloud just data center, is it somewhere in between, or is it cloud? In this case, potentially Azure or AWS or whatever else. And that makes a lot of sense. Thomas, I was using the analogy that we had for virtualization, where people would look at all the applications they have and they're excited to do virtualization. They'd start with the ones that are easiest to migrate to a virtualized environment, or in this case, a cloud environment. So they may take, a portion of those and migrate those immediately, and then say, hey, I've got some heavier duty things that are a high performance, high requirements, maybe interdependencies with other applications, and put those off till either later, or maybe they'll never move. And like I say, we see currently well over half the refreshes happening in the data center, with some portion migrating out to the cloud.
Perfect.
Yeah,
and
absolutely, Kent. That was a very common thing with VMware, as you're mentioning, it's not uncommon. We'll probably expect to see the same thing with SQL, where easier workloads go to cloud first, and same type of thing happened with VMware, right? They didn't start out with SQL in VMware, and I suspect customers don't want to necessarily put SQL in the cloud as their first workloads, right? So it depends upon where customers are at in their roadmap, and maybe SQL is the answer in the cloud, but maybe it's not.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. So then I think we touched a little bit on the extended support from a security perspective. So Tom, are there any other extended support issues beyond just security patches that people need to think through as they kind of, as you say, kick the can down the road?
Yeah, the thing is, if you kick the can down the road, first of all, that's exactly what you're doing, right? You still have to address with the issues within that time frame. The extended support certainly gives you some time to deal with some of those issues, but it might not necessarily be your low-cost option, right? Not the low-cost solution. So as Kent and I both said, the extended support can be extremely costly. The one thing that we try to help identify, and I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, is that it might be a part of the solution for a customer, right? So let's try and keep your extended support costs down by identifying which ones we believe will, database instances or even database servers that might be specific troublesome for you or challenges, and then for those others that make sense to go to the cloud, let's move them, or leave them on-prem if that's your preference.
Perfect. So then, as we kind of touched on the hybrid, but Ken, what might be some of the other choices that they can make up or that could comprise the hybrid solution?
So there are, when we build out data centers, there are some other choices around hybrid. One of them could be to put their applications on the edge of the cloud. So organizations like Equinix and Digital Realty Trust, et cetera, have built data centers right on the edge of Azure and AWS hyperscaler data centers, and they have high-speed connectivity, and so you can get a lot of the benefits of being able to leverage cloud resources while keeping a portion in something you control, another data center, which is essentially hosted. Another one that's pretty interesting is the concept of Azure Stack. So Azure Stack is a Microsoft solution supported by other OEMs, including HPE and Dell and Cisco, et cetera, where you take the Azure experience, exactly the control panels and everything, and run those in a data center or a solution called Azure Stack. So it's based on server technologies, kind of a hyper-converged looking set of servers within internal storage. One of the things we're doing in the Insight CVCT labs is setting that up so customers can kind of come and look and say, what does that look like? And actually doing a business alignment with the, what does it cost to run on, new hardware on-prem? What does it cost to run in kind of what we call this hybrid Azure Stack solution, where you're running Azure, but it's on hardware that you either have in your data center or host? And the third option being, what would it cost to run this in the cloud? So yes, there are some other choices that we can consider if that's needed. And Azure Stack being kind of it's kind of like cloud, but I have some of the benefits of my own data center as well.
So the next area that always comes up, always a big consideration, is security and data protection. So I think either Tom or Kent, can you touch a little bit on the security and what if we go to the cloud versus keeping it on-prem, and what are some of the considerations to take into account?
Sure, I can talk to that. Obviously, backup and DR of your data is extremely important. You need to consider that as part of how you're going to upgrade and deal with the end of support solutions, whatever they may be that you pick. And security, of course, obviously cloud is a very secure environment, but you have to, if you're going with a hybrid approach, like even if, for instance, you're putting your data, close to the cloud, and the applications in cloud, you really need to identify, your data in transit, and at rest, and all those types of requirements for your applications as well as the data itself. So we take a look at, it from multifaceted, not just, what's happening to the data, right? Upgrading SQL is primarily the data, but we also need to look at your applications. Is it really a good fit for cloud? Why are you moving that application to cloud? Is it really able to take, and be scaled and be agile and take advantage of those cloud features that are available today, right? If you're not, it might not be the most cost-effective, solution. It may or may not, but we need to take a look at that, right? As well as, again, the proximity of the data to those related applications and their dependencies.
So what if a customer wants to migrate totally off of SQL, Tom?
So that's not really part of this, what we do here, but we can do that, right? I mean, not for specific offerings that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but these are really focused around end of support for Windows and SQL. But if you really want to, move to some other database, for instance, Postgres or something else, right? We can certainly absolutely do that. That's more of a re-architecture of that environment, and you, again, really need to take into consider your applications. So it's not really an upgrade, process. At that point, that's more of a migration to a different set of tools that you want to use.
So then, now taking a look, like as a customer wants to go down this path, what are some of the Insight offerings that we can provide for them?
So we put together some offerings that we will tailor to our clients. And when we think about this, it's kind of in two phases. Phase one is let's get an assessment of what needs to be done. So we'll call that, the phase one of the environment that says we're going to go and look at the environment, understand, with your help, what applications you have, go through an analysis of them. Can they be upgraded? What do you want for a platform, whether that be cloud or updated hardware, other interdependencies and things like that. And then phase two would be, once we present that to you, and that includes interviews with your lines of business and stuff like that. Once we present that to you, that will include things like a bill of materials and even a proposal that if you choose to have us do the remediation, i.e. phase two, we would do that. So phase one, let's figure out what needs to be done. Phase two, let's get it done. And so we kind of created two levels. One of the reasons we created what we call essentials level for each of them. So essentials is a sampling. It's of, if somebody has hundreds and hundreds, we don't need to look at each one to get a good idea of what the environment is going to require. So it could be 20 to 60, servers. And the reason we created that smaller essentials level is that we have some partners that potentially could fund these. So whether it's Windows or SQL, end-of-life strategy, essentials level, phase one, would go through and get a sampling of your environment, give you a good idea of what we need to do. And, if from that you say, hey, I need more detail on some of the other environment, we can go and extend that. Or we can just say, okay, we have enough of information to kind of move forward to the phase two. There is an enterprise level that is a little bit more customized to the size of the environment. We've seen a wide variety from somebody having 20 to 30 SQL servers or Windows servers to literally thousands of SQL servers and Windows servers that they have to remediate. So the enterprise level is really, we sit down and try to figure out, what would this really take for us to do the phase one assessment.
Perfect. So now, guys, just want to go through. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask them as we go through. We're wrapping up here now. So I think Kent, you touched on these deliverables, but as you pull up this new slide, are there any topics here that you wanted to kind of touch on that you haven't already mentioned for the listeners?
Well, I could speak to those, Rich.
Yep.
As Kent was saying, the assessment, we do that whether it's be for Windows or for SQL, but they're obviously a little different approach for each, as far as tools that we use. However, it's the methodology of how it's delivered is very similar for both. For instance, there's a actual tools discovery process. We use different tools depending upon whether it's SQL or Windows. With the Windows side, we actually use an internal IP tool that we have. We actually call it SnapStart, and it's free as part of the project. We don't have to procure some other solution to actually do that, so it's bundled in with the solution, with the offering delivery. And then we also do, it's really important, an interview-based discovery that defines your business and application requirements, right? And we really marry that data together that we find as part of the interview as well as part of the tools discovery. So, for instance, let's say you have a SQL environment that you want us to analyze. We will come in with a number of tools, DMA, MAPI, a number of other tools on top of that, and marry that alongside of the interview data that, we actually come in and ask and collect. And as part of that, then that married data, we actually do an assessment on, an analysis on, if you will, and build you a roadmap and recommendations on what the next steps would be. It also includes a financial assessment or estimate, what it's going to cost for you to get there, right? We would add a phase two statement of work that would tell you this is what it's going to look like, how big it's going to be, what we're going to do, that type of thing. If you're looking to get new hardware as part of that, we would include a bill of materials, a BOM estimate that would include, the cost for estimated cost for hardware and software and the recommendations that we would provide. And then at the end, we would provide a phase one. And what I mean by that, an assessment, executive presentation, so to your team. That way you know where to go and what the next steps are. And we do that for both of these offerings. Same type of process.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. It's great to hear what tools your team has and the ability to deliver a good package for the clients. So with that, I think we pretty much wrapped up the presentation today. Again, I appreciate all of your time. If you need additional information, you can contact your Insight account executive. If you don't have one of those, then you can set up a consultation with David Bartley, who's the technical BDM on the Intel team here at Insight. Also, you can reach out to David via the email alias down below. I won't read it all off, but you can see it down at the bottom. That'll go to David and his other peers on the team to be able to provide information for you and then go the next steps as well. Okay, so with that, Jordan, anything else on your front? Otherwise, I would, again, like to say thanks to Kent and Tom and for their help and assistance and for everyone on the line. And Jordan, if you don't have any other things, we can wrap up our webinar.
Yep, we'd like to thank everyone for their attendance today, and thank you guys for presenting. Have a great day.